name is Daryl Anka. I am the channel for an entity known as Bashar. I am also a writer, producer, director. As a young boy, I've always been artistically inclined. I could start drawing as soon as I could pick up a pencil when I was 2 years old. But I had an incident happen that happened at 3 years old that I didn't remember until much later in my life. And I was playing in the living room of my parents' home. And I was, one of those things where kids make a fort with a card table and a blanket. I was underneath it, I was drawing. And what appeared to me in midair was this whirlpool of light just hanging there. Now, as a child, I didn't think anything of it because I didn't know what was normal and what wasn't. But my perception is that there was somebody communicating to me through that as if it was a window to somewhere else. For me, that became what I would consider to be the inciting incident that indicated that there was some kind of an agreement here that was going to unfold at some point in my life that had to do with the channeling. But it didn't really get triggered until 1973. In 1973, I was in my early 20s when on 2 occasions in broad daylight, a week apart, I had 2 very close UFO sightings with friends with me both times. The first time was only about 125 feet away. The second time was only about 60 or 70 feet away. Some kind of an advanced technological ship. No sound, being able to move in unusual ways. You don't think much of it until you actually see something yourself. And then your whole world turns upside down because those things weren't supposed to really exist. But seeing something like that solidly made me realize that things were much different than we were being told. So I wanted to find out more about it. I started doing the research, finding any book I could on UFO sightings. And at that time in 1973, the metaphysical section in bookstores wasn't very big. You could probably find everything on one shelf. There was UFO stuff, there was psychic stuff, there was channeling stuff. Mostly the Seth material at that time was becoming pretty popular. So I read all of that and I started just kind of digesting all of this stuff and realizing that there was sort of a whole other world going on here. 10 years after the sighting, I was introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars at the time. I went into the class not because I thought I wanted to be a channel in any way, shape, or form, but I was curious as to how channeling could be taught, because I just sort of assumed it was something that just sort of happened to you out of the blue. But I wanted to further my research, so I went into the class, and it was a series of different guided meditations, and it wasn't like you were necessarily expected to have to channel with an entity, but it was about getting in touch with your creative side, your own higher mind, however you wanted to use the meditations. But about halfway through the course, we were in a particular guided meditation being given by the entity through the channel. Something happened that I can only describe as a kind of an instant telepathic contact from Bashar. It was like somebody just sort of shoved this information in my head in a split second. I instantly remembered making an agreement before this life to do this with him. I understood the UFO had been shown to me by him to get me to start doing the research that I needed to do. So when it came time to fulfill the agreement, I would have enough information to not be afraid of it, to be somewhat understanding of what was happening. And the message basically was, now you know it's time to begin. Is this something you still want to do? It was a choice. Now, all of this happened in a split second. It's like somebody just took a DVD and just shoved it in your head, and suddenly you've got the whole story. And I thought, okay, am I hallucinating? Is this a side effect of the meditation? I didn't know what was going on. But the second this was happening, because I hadn't said anything out loud, the entity stopped talking to the class and turned right to me and said, there is an entity here for you right now if you're ready to begin. And in that same moment, I happened to glance behind me at one of the other classmates had somehow picked up on the image of Bashar I saw in my head, and she was sketching it on a piece of paper, his face. So I said, okay, this is not just my imagination. There's something going on here. I guess I'll just keep exploring and see what happens. So by the end of the next class, a woman named Margot Chandley, who was doing the first thesis paper for her doctorate on the connection between psychology and channeling, asked me to be one of the subjects that she could study to write her paper. And so I would go to her house, she would invite friends, I would sit there and channel, she would take her notes and write her paper. Well, the first week, it was like 5 friends. But the next week, there was 10 friends, and then it would be 20 friends and 30 friends. And then we had to start renting auditoriums to get all the people in. And as soon as people in other cities and other countries started hearing the tapes, they started inviting me to travel to their city or their country. And here I am 36 years later, still doing this.